Welcome, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. I see people still joining, but we'll go ahead and kick this off. My name is Ryan Williams. I'm the Vice President for DIBS AI, and this is the DIBS AI Study Club. So really quickly, as a reminder for everybody attending, we are recording this session, and it will be available after this session, after we compile it on our website. It's under the category of deep learning in our support website. So really quickly, on a personal note, I've had braces for, like 20 months, and I'm so excited because tomorrow I get to get my braces off. Tomorrow morning's the day, everyone. So I'm pretty stoked about that. But I will confess that I never fully understood the challenges orthodontists have in finishing cases. And now I understand much more why that is such an important topic and the contribution we can make there. So I've gained an appreciation for it. It's been awesome. But even though it's been great, I'm still excited to get braces off. So anyways, I thought I'd share that with you. Also, it's freezing cold in my office, so I put a little jacket on. So I hope that's okay. All right, let's get started. Today, we are going to turn some of our time to two topics: how to do quicker approvals and how to improve patient experience. And we appreciate and welcome Dr. T.C. Hardy for being willing to share how he accomplishes these two objectives in his practice. TC actually runs several practice locations with associate doctors kind of scattered in and around Denver, Colorado. He's also been using DIBS AI for several years now, I think TC was one of our early adopters back in the day and has, what's the right word, endured our growing pains, maybe? Weathered our growing pains. So
Sure, a little bit. It honestly, even at least for me, I didn't think it was, even that bad in the beginning, but definitely you've seen a lot of improvements with the software for sure.
Good. Well, that's kind of you to say that. Growing a business is tough, as a lot of you on the call know. So it's awesome. So TC is a power user of DIBS AI. He's been gracious enough to be willing to share his expertise and talent with us today. He will also be taking questions, so feel free to use the Q&A function on this webinar to pose your questions, and then I'll pose those to him. And I think that's it. We'll welcome as well. On the call, we have joining us several staff members at DIBS AI. They're available to answer any questions as well too. So TC, you're not running solo here. You've got us to help you, and perfect. Let's start with that introduction, TC. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds great. Let me work on getting my screen shared. And first, just thanks to OrthoSelect and DIBS AI for the opportunity to chat with you guys. Just a little bit about myself. I went to Tufts University. They ringed me in for my bachelor's degree through my certificate of orthodontics. And so I will probably die with student loans from them, being a private university. But it really was a wonderful school. Undergraduate through the dental program and orthodontics, they listened to their students and really tried to do what they could for their student base. So really did appreciate it. But finished up in 2012. Went into private practice and started ownership in 2013 out here in Colorado, and have since formed a small group practice in the Denver metro and northern Colorado area with myself and 3.5 other associates outside of myself. Started using DIBS in the winter of 2020. And so I think we're on version 5 at the time, 4 switching over to 5 when I first started, and the same principles was still there, but I think, the software workflow was probably a little bit more wanky and jonky at times, but it was still, even back then, where I saw the value in it. And for treating comprehensive bracket cases, it's been my main treatment modality ever since. I am your everyday orthodontist. It definitely isn't where I'm the type of doc that really analyzes and gets into every little detail. Not really a strong researcher or anything like that. I do think it's important, and have done a little bit just for myself, as well as for Ortho Select, just because of the value I see in DIBS AI. But again, just kind of your normal practicing orthodontist. So I definitely don't want to say that I have all the answers, but I'm always there trying to improve treatment modalities for better patient outcomes. And then something that is important to me, which I hope is important for most orthodontists, is trying to improve on having a strong assistant-led clinic to give the best care to patients. And then as a group practice, to continue to work on modalities to improve continuity as care, continuity in care as patients transfer from one associate to another. If that happens, obviously, always hope that it doesn't, but filling in for each other if someone's on vacation or whatever it might be, it's still nice to have some of that continuity. Just really quickly, this is my family. My wife, she's a pediatric dentist, and she does her niche practice with a lot of laser dentistry, hard tissue lasers and soft tissue lasers and frenectomies and all that. And then we were very, very lucky to get blessed with 3 boys and no girls, but they're 3, 5, and 8 now. And this is most of our group practice. Blue is the administrative side, and then pink is the clinical side, and then a couple of the doctors splashed in there as well. And so even as we continue to grow, it's all about making it a family and having fun and supporting each other. And so diving into some of the DIBS stuff, Kaden just asked me just a couple of weeks ago if I'd be willing to do the study club. And so definitely where I was, kind of just, again, kind of being your typical everyday doctor, scratching my head about, all right, well, what on earth can I talk about? And it was where a while ago we did a small presentation at NISO that I was able to present at. And so, talking to Kaden about what I could discuss on clinical efficiencies and keeping the setup process simple. I felt, tying in some data for some of the new doctors would be worthwhile as well, to see, potentially what the power is behind the software. And so anyway, for that NISO presentation, did just a small survey of patients in my practice, about 50 patients. And it was where I tried to eliminate as many biases as possible. And so I just went through consecutive patients day after day, and every single start that I had, that was either a DIBS AI patient or a chairside patient, and then went through their chart and tried to tabulate out to see what the differences were. Honestly, for my own sake too, I really appreciated the software, and just from the analytical standpoint, knew the value behind it, but I never actually saw or ran any data behind it. But it was where there were differences in my chair side and DIBS treatment modalities. And so for both chairside and DIBS patients, my estimated treatment times that I presented to patients at the start during the consultation, when you averaged them out, chairside, it averaged out to be 22.5 months, and DIBS AI estimated at 22.3 when you averaged them all together. Really nice difference to see, that, kind of was what I was hoping for, investing in doing digital and direct bonding as a private practice, was that my actual treatment time in months went from an average of 26 months down to 19 months. And so instead of telling patients, oh, hey, I know we're at your estimated treatment time, but one more month, one more visit. It actually was where more often than not, I was able to say, hey, we're finishing up a little bit earlier. Repositioning of brackets decreased, and then most significantly is the number of visits decreased. The time for bonding went from 85 minutes down to 74 minutes for our clinical team. And then there's just a couple of things I'd point out with that. Even to this day, I still give all my start appointments 90 minutes. It really is where more often than not, my staff is finishing in under an hour with the start. But just with the complexities of a group practice and just making sure that patient care is the best that it can be, I've still kept my starts at 90 minutes, but I do think that's outside of the norm, and especially with digital indirect bonding, not something that you need. And what my takeaway was from that just initial study was that I was doing less wire bending. Overall, I was the type of doctor that would do a lot of wire bending over bracket repositioning. I still did a little bit of both, but definitely ended up doing a lot less wire bending, so a lot fewer visits at the end to get those details. And so then, you know, just with that, my confidence in what the bracket positioning was utilizing DIBS AI, my confidence skyrocketed with that. And so it was where I was able to do things more efficiently. Currently, I am doing where just about a year and a half ago, went through 150 patients and just one consult after the other, put them into either DIBS AI or chairside. And just the start from one start to the next start is just where we divided them out to, again, try and just keep it even and eliminate some biases. And so hopefully in the next year or two that have a little bit more data on that, just again for myself, but also for OrthoSelect. And then just a couple of cases that we went through. This is class 2 div 2 case. Was able to get things done in 18 months and just a really good, nice locked in finish. Class 3 with an anterior crossbite. And again, 18 months, able to get things finished very nicely. Class 2, division 1 subleft. And again, 17 months. Class 1 open bite getting done in 19 months. And then another class 3 getting done with 15 months. And there's those cases that do go long. But I would say overall, it was pretty hard for me to be able to pull out cases and select cases like this when I was doing chairside. You know, maybe once in a while it would happen, but very, very rarely. Sorry, there we go. So moving on to I guess the main topic for tonight. Just a couple of things that I've found and worked on with my group practice over the years to keep it easy for myself, keep it easy for the team, and make it a good patient experience for the patients coming through. It also is where before doing this study club, I reached out to a few friends and a couple of them that do DIBS AI as well, just to kind of ask what were some of your hurdles as you got started and we're working through the process of bringing DIBS AI on board. And multiple team members talked about having to get used to indirect bonding when they were doing chairside previously. So we'll be talking about bonding as well, because that definitely is tied into patient experience. But for the patient consultation, having a digital workflow has been amazing for our practice to get, quote, same day starts in a format that is easy and not stressful on the team, and isn't forcing an additional patient into the clinical flow where you don't really have the room for it. And that definitely is just where a lot of frustrations arise with the team members. A lot of frustrations arise with patients needing to wait. And so with the digital workflow, just like you would with your clear aligners, getting that contract signed and getting all the paperwork done and getting that initial payment done, and then only, being obligated to make sure you have full records in a scan is a really, really great, easy way to get a patient started without putting a big crunch on the clinical team if you're trying to do a same-day start with chairside bonding. And so that's been a really great addition to our practice, where I never was a fan of trying to do a same day start chairside, and this has made it a lot easier for us to get contracts and payments done right during the consultation without creating much hiccups in the clinical flow. Ortho Select and DIBS AI, they make it really easy to still keep patients happy with being able to get braces on quickly. It is very easy and pretty predictable to have the clinical setup and everything done and turned around in 2 weeks. And so from consultation to starting the patient in 2 weeks, it is a very easy standard that you can implement in your office if you want to. When it's just 2 weeks, there's not too many patients that are getting worried or frustrated about when their case is going to come in and when they're going to get started. And I know that, with some of the labs, all of us doctors have worked with over the years, that sometimes there are those conversations with patients saying, hey, where's my case? Where's my case? I want to get going. And that is a very nice and wonderful thing with Ortho Select as well. The way I have it in my office for that clinical flow is our treatment coordinator creates the lab slip, and then I do have a designated clinical team member that uploads cases to Ortho Select's portal. Their submission process is extremely easy, and so depending on how you divide things out with your team members in your office, it is something that would be very easy for the treatment coordinator to do as well, just to get the full case uploaded and submitted to DIBS AI as well, if you prefer. A small little tidbit that has made things very easy for me to make sure I'm managing my patient flow and getting cases back on time is, instead of putting a case number in that patient case number field when we're submitting a new case, it is where I put the due date and when the patient is getting bonded. And so as I go through all the different cases that we have, I'll be able to see that due date and prioritize which patients to get done first. And so just a small little tidbit to keep yourself organized and on track. And then I still like to pull up the patient's chart and imaging. But if it is where you're doing things on the fly, down at the bottom is where you can add additional notes. And it can be a great place to add additional notes on, if you need to work on the smile arc, if you need to extrude the upper incisors 2 millimeters to improve, the smile, if it's a premolar extraction case, all those different little things that are particular for that individual patient, to where if you're not in front of their chart and in front of their imaging, that you'd be able to adequately and appropriately treatment plan their case. Utilizing those notes is a very great thing. And that's something where I'll just talk to my treatment coordinator about, hey, if you can please make notes on these things. And so then on the internal lab slip that she creates for our clinical coordinator to upload the case, all those additional notes can be there. And so just a small little area within DIBS AI that you can utilize if you're not now. And so again, during that submission, down at the bottom is where you put that additional info. And then when you're actually working on the case, bottom right is where you can find those notes. For a DIBS setup demo, this is just how I do things. And I think there's probably a lot of docs out there that have their way of doing their DIBS setup honed in efficiently and effectively. But I still thought it would be worthwhile for me to go through one. And there's tons and tons of features within DIBS AI. And I think some of it is practitioner preference where you're going to have to find the things that you prefer and that you like, that will make your cases go well and efficiently in the way you'd like to. But I'll go through what I typically do for a start. And so at the very, very beginning, I do bring the patient into existing. I do look at the different treatment options, and depending on the case and what you need to do, that's where you might want to, again, work on an open bite bracket setup scenario, a deep bite bracket scenario. OrthoSelect put in tons and tons of different bracket scripts, which is amazing and fantastic to be able to see all these and select them on the fly. Their standard is an MBT script, and so not often am I having to change it, but that is where I'll go in and change that if needed. I do always go and look at the torque and wires to make sure everything's the same, and in general their standard is 1925, but once in a while there might be that mix up where it's a different wire or something like that. Something that was just a random thing that I found out, and I'm sure a lot of docs have seen it. Once in a while in the predicted outcome, you'll see a lower posterior tooth where the torque is just really out of whack. You know it's not correct. You know it's not predictable. You're looking at the bracket slot, and even the bracket slot is angled compared to the rest of the brackets. And so you're like, oh, you're right, this isn't right, something's wrong. And so you're trying to mess around with it. You're either just kind of guessing on where the final bracket position would be, or you're, reaching out to a tech. But this only happens maybe once in every 100 cases, if that. I hardly ever see it anymore too. It probably happened a little bit more often in previous versions, but still once in a while I'll see it. Switching how OrthoSelect displays the torque and expresses the torque, I have noticed in general has corrected and improved most of those really weird random one-offs where that tooth isn't right, where just, yeah, that premolar's got torqued way out of position and it's like, hey, this isn't right. Majority of the time just doing that has corrected it. And so I'll go through and check, make sure arch wires are correct, and then if I do see any weird random torque issues, I'll go through and just quickly select that, and majority of the time that improves things. But then I go up to the tooth position and just very, very quickly, and I normally have contour lines on, but just very, very quickly go through and detail each tooth position. Why I like doing it on the existing for just the initial part is I think there is value in seeing gum architecture, seeing the emergence profile outside, how it comes out of the tooth, how it relates to the gum tissue surrounding it. I'll mess around with bracket heights a little bit, but usually not too much. A lot of that comes into the predicted outcome and seeing how the occlusion and how the biting relationship works. But just go through that. The wonderful, wonderful thing about this is, if I have two consults lined up, one after the other and a full house in the back, I'm not sitting there trying to get a full bracket case bonded chair side. I can leave this right here the way it is, and then, come back to it 15, 20 minutes later. I'll usually try and find a good stopping place for myself, try and do a quadrant and then come back and finish the next quadrant a little bit after that. But go around and just quickly adjust those. This is something I've noticed with my brackets. Unfortunately, the in and outs on the bracket tube are not where I like them, where the distal usually gets tucked in on the lingual more than I'd like. So that's just kind of a standard that I do quite a bit. But just very quickly go through the case. And get some minor adjustments there. And then what really is where a lot of the value with DIBS AI is the predicted outcome. And I was honestly very, very skeptical myself. Ryan and I have had conversations in the past about how I'm doing my setups and what I'm utilizing. And it was where I thought this was just a really nice indirect bonding system, that instead of using a model and still using bracket gauges, that I can actually get onto a computer and hone in on it even a little bit more with that digital model setup. But as I've used it over the years, and then something I urge everybody to do is look at progress records. You do your initial bonding, and I'm assuming majority of you guys get up to a large rectangular night-tie wire and do progress records somewhere around that point. But once you get into those rectangular wires and have progress records, I urge you to actually go back in and pull up your old DIBS setup for that patient and see how close the tooth positioning compares to what you're seeing in the mouth. And honestly, you would be surprised that how often it is very similar, where all of a sudden it might not be as exaggerated as this, but you would see a step between the 6 and the 7. And so then you're having to do bracket repositioning. And so again, that just after that initial bracket positioning on the existing model, it is where I will then go in and really try and hone in things on the final setup. This is getting near the edge. Something I would say that has also been really nice working with OrthoSelect and having worked with several other indirect bonding companies over the years is this might be pushing it for them, and they will email you back and say, hey, we're not able to create adequate indirect bonding tray setup for you. But they do an amazing job really working with the scan that you have and the software to give you a good indirect bonding tray, even when you kind of feel like it's pushing the limits. And so then I would say I spend a fair amount of time in this setup to really hone in on the details. And does it always match 100%? No, but this is definitely where you can start to eliminate a fair amount of your bracket repositionings and wire bendings when you spend a little bit more time on this. And again, definitely where I urge you guys to compare the two, compare your progress records, compare, just your patient setup before you do any repositioning to see how close it is to what you see on the DIBS setup. So that's really about it. I will look at the occlusion, and the way OrthoSelect's bite setup is done is I'm more looking to see even contacts throughout, even if there's a fair amount of red. I'm not as worried about it. If I saw red on one single tooth and then just, light blue or nothing on everywhere else, I would start to be a little bit worried about, is that tooth in a good position or not? But if I'm seeing some pretty even consistent markings throughout the whole entire occlusion, for the most part, I'm not too worried that there's going to be a major bite interference. Another nice thing that I'll do is I'll look for bracket interferences at the start, and if it's something small, hey, maybe I'll just try and move it that little step or two just to get out of the way. But if it's something that's significant, then I have notes for my clinical team members on needing to do build-ups. But that's really about it. I spent half my time blabbing, but it is where you're able to get a very good high quality setup in just 5-10 minutes. Most of my cases, when I'm not chit chatting, it really does just take me about 5 minutes. And again, the wonderful thing is I can do a quadrant, get up, go see a few patients, do a consult, come back, do another quadrant. And so there isn't that time crunch or that backlog of patients waiting forever because you're doing a chairside bonding for 10-15 minutes. So it really is a great feature. Several docs did talk to me about bonding with an indirect bonding tray. And so this is the protocol that we follow. And I just had one of my clinical team members do this, 2 of them on their own. So not something that I was partaking in at all. This was all assistant led. I have my staff only etch 1 quadrant at a time for 45 seconds, at least 30 seconds and no more than 60 seconds. There was a really good study a bit ago where I was listening to on a lecture, and they had microscope imaging and a bunch of research on making sure a bond is successful. And I would say more so than anything else is doing the appropriate etch time. And from one of my takeaways from that was even more so than making sure the tooth is bone dry is if you under etch, the tubules aren't going to open up. But particularly if you over etch, the surface of the enamel gets pretty mushy. And so then the primer and composite really can't integrate well into the tooth. And so I think if you're etching the whole entire dentition, top and bottom, that first tooth that you etch is probably getting more than 60 seconds. And then that last tooth that you're etching is probably getting less than 30 seconds. And so etching by a quadrant at a time, I do think can be very, very helpful. Another very strong takeaway from that was there can be a lot of residual etch on the tooth that the team member doesn't necessarily see, but that is still present, and that acidic etch can still drastically affect the success of the bonding. We do utilize tooth dryers. And so after we do the initial etch and rinsing, we try and get majority of the water out with just the air water syringe, but then we do go back in and do a tooth dryer. I think there's, again, just too much risk of a little bit of water being in the air water syringe that can affect the bond strength in the end. And then we've worked really hard to make sure our team members are not using much primer. I'm sure that's true for every office. They're always using way too much. And so it is where, as a standard, they just do 2 drops. And then if they feel like it is where they're running out, that they can add an additional drop. But it is 2 drops for the whole entire dentition. My staff, they put a little bit of primer on the entire surface of the tooth just to make sure that there is primer for where the bracket needs to be. As long as you light, you shouldn't have much issue with the primer sticking to the indirect bonding tray. We've never really had too many issues at all. And so we Assure Plus the majority of the tooth surface. And once the tooth dryer comes out, we're not using anything else besides the tooth dryer. We're not doing the tooth dryer and then going back to the air water syringe, but just a little bit of air to get rid of some of that alcohol that's in the primer. Let's go there. Is it going? Yep, and then just quickly lighting it. We don't need to see that. This is something that we've really worked on over the years in my office to really make sure that the bracket placement is the best that it can be, and it's really detailed. And so you'll see she's just very consistent finger pressure, but then she's very quickly going in with an Explorer to make sure that bracket still is just really locked in good at the base of that box within the tray, just to make sure that bonding position is as adequate as it can be. Very consistent pressure with fingers. And in general, you're not trying to change the pressure at all when the light is on. Any change in pressure on that indirect bonding tray when you're actively lighting can put a lot of stress and strain on that composite, and that's where a lot of microfractures can occur. And so trying to keep that steady finger pressure and then not just waving the light back and forth. I don't think that's as risky as consistent finger pressure. But just constant finger pressure, a little bit of light pressure on the tooth with the light, and then lighting that one bracket, moving on to the next bracket, very light pressure with the light curing unit itself on the buccal surface, and then lighting it and then moving on to the next. I think as long as you're really keeping that consistent finger pressure, even if you are dragging the light across back and forth across brackets, I think you'll still have pretty good successful bonding. But I do think lighting bracket by bracket can help. And doing that little bit of extra, that little extra step of using the Explorer to push the bracket into the base of that box, just to give yourself that extra assurance that the bracket is ideally placed as possible, is well worth it. I've trained my staff on making sure that the tray is very nicely and evenly sat. Visually, you don't see any pockets between the tooth and the edge of the tray. They don't feel any rocking. Like if you have that second premolar that's still slightly erupting, if you get things turned around in 2 weeks, everything should still be pretty stable, and still have a very nice adequate bonding. But all of a sudden 3, 4, 5 weeks, that second premolar might have erupted a little bit. And so they've been trained to make sure that tray is not rocking and stable, to make sure that bracket is adequately and correctly placed.
Hey, TC, let me
Yeah.
interrupt you. I've just got,
Yes, please do.
yeah, there's a few questions that before you move on, while you're kind of on these topics, maybe we can ask. So you mentioned doing almost all of your cases with DIBS AI. So are you treating phase 1 cases with DIBS AI in your practices?
I am not. My phase 1s, I do chair side. If there's a comprehensive case that I am starting early where 6, 7, 8 teeth are still babies or not erupted. And the only reason I'm doing that is just time value and lab cost value. OrthoSelect is definitely very, very cost effective with their digital indirect bonding. But I feel there's a lot more value in getting a comprehensive case and occlusion corrected with DIBS AI versus bonding upper sixes and 2-to-2 for a phase 1 case. As quick as you guys turn things around, I mean, you guys turn things around quicker than any other lab from what I've seen. And so very, very easy to implement it for all of your cases and standardize it, if that's something that is of value and importance to you. And if you have a really large practice where you're seeing 100+ patients a day, I could see a lot of value in just standardizing it for all of your staff, no matter what the type of treatment is, that they know they're going to be doing a digital indirect bonding, and that they can get through that process. I mean, those videos, again, that was all my staff. I wasn't involved at all. I'll talk about it a little bit more at the end. But during the digital setup, that is where is a great opportunity for you to make notes on, power chains, open coils, where you want buildups, what teeth to engage, not engage, all that stuff. And so it really is, when the patient comes in, your clinical team member can introduce themselves, and lead them through that whole entire appointment, where you're just coming in at the very end for a check. And that check can be, 1 to 3 minutes to make sure that everything's good and lined up well, but then honestly, the other 90 seconds of those 2 to 3 minutes is just saying hi to the family and making sure you're making face. And so with phase one, there's definitely that potential where if you feel it is of value to not take that chair side doctor time away, to be able to focus on other things, there definitely is value there too.
Okay, excellent. You earlier on you mentioned your workflow with your TC passing the slip on having a staff member. What does your TC say during the initial consult? Do they actually explain DIBS AI as part of that initial consult, and do they try and build some sort of value there?
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. I have gone through the gambit of, oh, we're going to be a clear aligner office, and other appliances too, that just 2 or 3 different appliances where over the years we're like, this is how we're going to do things. And in the end, just to if someone comes in asking for a specific appliance, like, yeah, you want to do it for them, and there's still that conversation about different appliances. But honestly, at least from what I found and with our patient base, majority of people still appreciate and honestly expect brackets when they come into the office. And so there's a brief conversation about appliances, but for the most part, we're talking about braces and braces in our office and how it's handled and why we're different from a majority of other doctors, utilizing a digital setup in where I'm a huge believer that this is going to be the standard of care in the next 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, everything's changing so rapidly in orthodontics that honestly, yeah, in 5 years, it could be more of the standard. Um,
Awesome.
and so we're talking about how we're leading the way on creating this new standard within the orthodontic field for, you know, better, more ideal bracket positioning that does in turn lead to more efficient treatment times and better visits and better confidence with the doctor and with the team and the treatment outcomes that the patient is going to receive, and that we're able to simulate the outcome. So there's a good conversation about that for sure.
Okay, awesome. A few more questions. You mentioned a tooth dryer. What brand? Where did you get your tooth dryer from?
That tooth dryer we just got off of Amazon. It is actually surprising that there isn't that much variety on tooth dryers, but that's like 40, $50. It will probably last you a year, and then you got to get another one. We actually invested, ADEC has a tooth dryer that you connect to um, your high-speed tubes. It doesn't get as hot as a tooth dryer, but again, you're eliminating that water. And so we've invested in those as our standard now, and it's like $600 per tooth dryer, but that thing's going to last us years. And it's connected right to the dental chair, so it's definitely a little bit nicer. Those black ones, they have a soft finish to it, and so they start to get dirty pretty quickly. All of a sudden there's that little bit of a surplus. And so then just as far as again, that patient experience, I mean, it's not fun to have a team member pull out a tooth dryer that is a little mucky looking. You want to present a very nice, clean atmosphere. And so those ADEC tooth dryers are pretty nice. I can get info on exactly
Awesome.
the brand and all that.
Awesome. A couple other questions. Thank you, Cambry, for these questions. We typically instruct during training that we need to complete the upper and lower 3 to 3. Yours look like they're 2 to 2. Are you having any issues over seating or under seating with 2 to 2?
No, we haven't, and that's not normally the standard. I think that was just a fluke with that patient where the upper canines were probably still erupting, and again, that's another nice thing. Like upper canines are still coming in. Hey, I'm just going to bond those chair side. I'm going to eliminate those from the digital and direct bonding tray to make sure that they are seating well and everything is predictable. That was just a fluke. The way you guys do it as your standard is how we utilize it.
Okay. A follow up on that. Also in training, we were told to push the brackets with a pusher to the tooth. What have you found is a difference in bond failure between pushing with fingers during entire lighting versus pushing with a pusher slightly at the beginning of placement?
So on that video, when you saw the team member pushing the bracket into the box with the scaler or with the explorer, that is where I just, during the preparation process of the trays, you know, during all the movement of the trays, taking it in and out of the box, whatever it might be, that I just want to have the confidence that that bracket didn't move from the base of the box at all. And it's not a major issue at all. But it is just that extra assurance to have that, hey, that bracket didn't slip out of the base of the box ever so slightly. And so that's kind of a separate thing where I'm just having the staff double check to make sure the bracket's truly in the base of the box of the indirect bonding tray.
Okay. Awesome. So
Then,
yeah, so I think there's two answers there,
yeah,
right?
but then yeah, then the when you're actually lighting, um, at least how my staff do it, and again, there's not a right or wrong way, and like it really is where I'm just your typical ortho. I don't, but anyway, how I have my staff do it is finger pressure on the occlusal to make sure the tray is seated well, and they're not pushing hard because you can distort the trays, but pressure to make sure the trays are sat well. But then they use the head of the curing light to do a little bit of pressure onto the indirect bonding tray and onto the facial or occlusal surface and onto the bracket to get that little bit of pressure against the tooth.
Nice.
So they use the curing light for that.
Yeah, I think the intent there, Cambry and everybody else, is just make sure there's no bubbles. I think you're really kind of just making sure there's no bubbles in there and just enough pressure to do that. So awesome. Good.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say, I mean, just from what I've seen my staff do chairside, there's going to be less bubbles in the composite doing indirect bonding. They're usually prepping it ahead of time. It's sitting and getting a little bit soft and meshing into the bracket base itself. Where everyone's seen it, your assistant, no matter how many times you tell them, pack that composite into the base, all of a sudden you see them, it's like 2 seconds, they squish it, and then they're putting it onto the tooth. I'm sure there's more voids doing chairside than with digital indirect bonding and just any indirect bonding system, I feel.
Gotcha. Good. Please,
I
Brittany.
just wanted to hop in really quick. So, Cambry, the reason why we recommend with the pusher is because we were having offices that were not applying that pressure with the curing light, and they actually had the curing light on before they even applied that pressure. So they were actually curing the adhesive before it even touched the tooth. So that's why we recommend that you do that little touch. Like, you can use the curing light, but that's what we were getting a lot of, was they were having debonds because they weren't applying the pressure before they turned the light on. That's the reason for that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and changes in pressure during that curing process definitely, it definitely can increase some of those failures. Yeah. Once you get that pressure placed or whatever, if you're pushing with the pusher, I think in general you should have even some pressure on the tooth when you're curing it. But even if you don't, just whatever it is, don't change pressure when you're actively curing. I think that's a pretty big thing too.
Awesome. I think that's it for now, TC. I think we caught up on our questions. So
yeah, sweet. No, thank you.
And just so you're aware, I think we have around 10 minutes left here.
Yeah, sweet. Okay. So same thing on the bottom. This is my bonding protocol. Hopefully the QR code works if anyone wants to copy it and print it for their team members. And again, it's not the true die-hard way on how DIBS AI recommends their bonding protocol. It's just how I do it, and I've found it to be successful. And so if you guys would like that. And then I didn't include it at the end, but I'll be sure to get my email information to everybody at the end. So part of that patient experience, as I mentioned, during that setup process, when you're working the DIBS AI software, this is the perfect time to give your team members all that information on what they need to do for that initial visit. So staff can lead the entire appointment with just a short check by the doctor at the end. For busier offices, a strong and self-sufficient staff that are able to move the patient quickly and effectively and confidently makes a huge difference on how they feel about it. Like, I mean, if you're getting through that bonding visit fast, the team member was able to just go boom, boom, boom. That really is a wow factor. So yeah, some of the predictability outcomes, and again, just really start looking at your progress records and compare it to how things turn out. So there's that little bit of step. And again, this is just, I'm looking back in time. This wasn't something I was proactively looking for. But there's that little bit of a discrepancy and ledge between the marginal ridges. Same thing on that 7. She's got to work on her brushing, but there's that discrepancy on the 7s. Right here, that 5 being tucked in, when that 5 swings out, you're thinking, oh, it's just going to swing out. There's going to be a change in torque. But when you look at those progress records, hey, man, that's pretty dang similar. And a lot of that is making sure you're choosing the right wire that you use in DIBS AI software under the torque and wires. And then obviously still using your clinical judgment. But if you choose the right wire and you're like, hey, this is going to engage the torque, this should turn out pretty close to what I'm seeing in the outcomes on the simulation. We talked a lot about the trays already. If you guys haven't noticed already, really start working with your staff on making sure they scan 7s better. It's a great way to get your second molars bonded, is getting it in the indirect bonding tray and not trying to do it chair side. I mean, all the cotton rolls and dry angles and everything, just to have it in the indirect bonding tray is fantastic. At the very end, if we do have any flash, we use brace paste that lights up with black lights, and there's black lights at all of our chairs. And at the end of the bonding in Colorado, I think most states we can, but in Colorado, where clinical assistants are allowed to polish. And so they use the black light to see if there's any flash. And then I think this is pretty well known that tooth warmers can ease up on that tray to make it a little bit easier to remove. If you haven't yet, it is worth working with OrthoSelect to get a couple different setups within your system. Like if you like having upside down upper lateral brackets for those laterals that are tucked way back, they can program that in for you, and then you can select it as an option. If you have standard 7s and the mini 7s, they can plug that in. I mean, whatever you have, if you're an office that does high torque and low torque anteriors, they can plug that in. And so then all of a sudden you can get all that customization for that patient right in the software. Hopefully most people do it. It really is nice to use QWERTY to just get around to different areas and views of the tooth versus using this sidebar and having to go back and forth and all that stuff. And so I do think it's worth getting used to the QWERTY keyboard. They have tons of shortcuts. I wasn't even able to snippet all of them. There's more than this. So tons and tons of shortcuts, and find the ones that are right for you. That will really help things become more efficient. A couple of things I've noticed over the years on outcomes not matching what you simulated. Significant differences in arch width of the patient at the start versus what you're utilizing for treatment wires. Right now, OrthoSelect simulates the wire engagement within the bracket, and they honed it in, I mean, to the detail of, the size wire you use, the size bracket you use. And so how much slop is with a 1925 wire and a 22 bracket, how much SOP is with an 1825 wire and a 22 bracket. And so that is truly amazing. But that's how they determine their torque. And so if you're doing really significant changes with your wires and arch width, that can start to change things from what you see in the simulation a little bit. Honestly, I don't think it really affects my treatment planning too much on the software, but it is something that I've seen. And so kind of tied in with that, not selecting the right wire size on how you finish your case. I mean, that's going to be a huge thing. And then as true with chairside or any digital and direct bonding, aggressive class corrections. So, if you're doing really aggressive class 2 correction with, rubber bands or herps, whatever it might be, that, that can overpower the torque of the bracket. I still overcorrect rotations just like you would chairside. I still do changes in bracket positioning for deep bites and open bites, smile architecture, that still holds true. And then it takes it into account when it's simulating the bite. This changed a bit because I was messing around with the bracket positioning where a lot of it's heavy, but OrthoSelect, when it does that initial bite simulation, it does try and, calculate and do a rough estimate of how that bite is, and their technicians go in and tweak it a little bit more. But as far as bracket heights, don't forget about attrition. I mean, if a premolar has tons of attrition, you're not going to want to have it at that, 3.5, 4 millimeter bracket height. You're probably going to need to decrease it. So, don't forget about that. Don't try and set every single case up to that very standardized MBT script, because that doesn't hold true. Every patient's different. You can use bracket height lines to see if something is significantly off. And so this will give you a good idea to see where they're getting that number, and how that's panning out, whether you're looking at it in existing or in the predicted outcome. And so, if you're looking at why is this bracket height so small, even though it looks good, or, this even looks like it's a higher, longer bracket height than the 6, why is it showing like that? That can give you some information on why it's doing so. And so if you're having a hard time figuring something out, at least something that I found beneficial is using the bracket height lines. And then if there is that one really weird tooth where the torque's really, really off, like I mentioned before, the software is able to do recalibration or whatever it does on the back end, but just switching back and forth between those can kind of give it a soft reset to simulate the outcome a little bit better. And I wish I had an example of that, but it hardly ever happens anymore anyway. And if you guys haven't gone there yet, I've gone through all the videos, the deep learning's in there. This is a QR code for the support tab. But go to DIBS, go to the OrthoSelect website. On the top right is a support tab, and then there'll be an option to select DIBS AI for the support. And there's just tons and tons of videos. And so if you guys have not done it, definitely worthwhile doing so.
You can also go to just dibsai.com. A little.
Yes, sorry. Yes, dibsai.com. And then the
you can
top right
skip a step if you like.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, really quickly, TC, just a few questions here. Are you using the trays for your turbos, or are you manually placing turbos, doing buildups?
We manually place them. My team's, so with DIBS AI, and different docs do different things differently. And again, a wonderful thing about you guys over there at the lab is you charge by the arch. And so a doc that likes to do one arch at a time, it's not an additional expense or lab burden. I'm doing one arch at a time versus both arches, but just from an efficiency standpoint, I usually try and do both arches. There's those few cases where I don't, but so with that being said, majority of patients need some buildups. And I've been doing top and bottom chair side like well before I started with DIBS AI, and so my staff have just gotten really, really good at doing it pretty quickly. It is where there is a great feature that continues to be improved within the software, and so if it is where if your confidence in your team members and their skills for placing bite turbos, balancing them, making sure they're appropriate size and position for what you want, utilizing DIBS bite turbo feature is definitely worthwhile.
Okay. Have you noticed a difference in D-bonds, whether you're doing chair side or direct bonding or DIBS AI?
With bracket failures, you know, in the beginning, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and I used to print in office, and I don't anymore. And I mean, if you guys have a really honed in lab tech in your office, you can do it, but you're not 3D printing a model for an Essex. You're 3D printing an indirect bonding tray that is trying to get things down to 1/10 of a millimeter. And the more accurate you get the bracket positioning, the better. And so it really is where I urge a lot of you guys to consider using them to do the full setup. But anyway, in the beginning, yeah, we had some additional bracket failures. I think some of it was because I was trying to print in office, and if there's just like that little bit of residual residue in the corner of the box where you're trying to place the bracket, all of a sudden it's not seating as well, or just there's all these little things. And it was a learning curve. We went from chair side to digital and direct bonding. I was not doing, you know, old school and direct bonding beforehand. And so it was a really big shift for us. But I would say now it is probably a little bit less. And there was a white paper that you guys did with, I gave you guys like 200 cases. And I think Dr. Battle gave you guys a couple hundred cases. And I think bracket failures was a part of that. And it was where as a whole, there was less bracket failures with digital and direct bonding compared to chair side, because you get better. I mean, you're isolating, you get all the brackets on faster. You're not waiting for the doctor to get over to you, and all of a sudden the tongue's moving around. But you know, the pressure of the indirect bonding tray on the bracket's nice. You're not moving the bracket around as much to try and find the ideal spot because you already did on the setup. There's a lot of logical reasons behind having less bracket failure once you get good at it.
Okay, excellent. And then TC, in your practice, do you do you reuse the trays for broken brackets? Or, you know, do you manage that inventory? Do you send them home with the patient? How do you do any of that?
We keep them for about 3 to 6 months. They start to get a little bit old and dry out. And it is where I actually like using a ligature cutter. I know a lot of doctors use razors, but I felt like it's a little bit safer and just as accurate to use a lid cutter to cut out the tooth. And so it is where it's not a hard, fast rule, but if the team member is bringing a patient back and they see that I'm getting ready to go into a consult, they'll bust out the indirect bonding tray and cut it and do it.
Take care of it. Good.
And chair side again.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. And I mean, this is kind of the tail end. This is a very, very personal opinion, but I think it's still very worthwhile to mention it to our profession. It's something that I've seen quite a bit with different custom brackets coming out and talking to general dentists, and seeing several cases where general dentists are having to do some crazy bone grafting because of what happened with a custom bracket case. If you're going to utilize OrthoSelect to create more of a custom bracket, by creating a custom base, and then also I think the bigger thing is that if you're going to try and fully engage that bracket, so like if you have a 22 slot and you're going up into a 21, 25, or even a 22 bracket, or, some of the other custom brackets out there that are, 19 slot with a 1925 wire, you can get a lot of torque. And I've seen several patients radiographs from various doctors around the area that I know personally, so that it was a, hey, how are we going to manage this type thing, where you're torquing the root completely out of the bone. And it's a scary thing to see. And I think, fortunately there are solutions to get the tooth back. There's solutions with the dentist for bone grafting, but just be really, really careful. And I would say I would strongly consider using the CBCT feature to help visualize how much those roots are changing, if you do decide to do that. And honestly, after doing both, I personally prefer a little bit of slop. I think there's a lot of healthy value to it. You're better able to keep roots in the bone. Something that I've noticed when you really try and fully engage a bracket and do custom bracket positioning is you're not going to get a full 100% expression, but you're going to get more. And so all of a sudden the torque of those upper incisors are going to just, be ever so slightly off. But then, the vertical's off, the aesthetics are off, and then trying to, reposition the bracket or detail the wire when it's engaged that tightly, it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice to get good at it, and to figure out what those side effects are, and how to manage it. And so when I was doing a lot of custom, there was a lot of times where I dropped down to a 1622 steel just to get some slot back, so that I had a little bit of give with the appliance. And so just something that is, again, very personal opinion, but worth mentioning. And then as far as patient experience and staff experience, consider outsourcing the lab process. I know there's a fair number of docs that 3D print in office, and it's still a great way. I did it for several years, and it wasn't bad at all. And we learned how to get good quality outcomes, but it's easier on staff. There's less reliance on personnel. All of a sudden, that lab tech that you've had for 5 years decides to leave or move. More consistent outcomes and better quality. And OrthoSelect does just make it extremely advantageous to work with them. The turnaround times are super fast. Their price point is wonderful. This is the box that they give you when they're sending a case out. And to be able to show up to the patient chair side with something looking like that versus, something you're putting in a Ziploc bag or in an old retainer case, I think that stands out, to where patients know, hey, something special is happening in this office. And so just kind of my final thoughts on that.
Okay, excellent. TC, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it's all right. Hopefully
yeah, no, that I feel like that was chock full. I love the hints and tips, and hopefully everybody on the call can benefit from that. I believe we got all the questions answered here, and I'm cognizant of the time as well. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and end for today. Let me just express gratitude for your attendance, for taking a minute, and for participating, and for the questions. We ended up, just so you know, we ended up with 37 attendees tonight. So thanks for being here and taking some time. A reminder, this will be posted in the deep learning area of our support website after it finishes compiling tonight. Our customer success team is always available. Text them, phone them, email them, drop by, whatever it takes. And we're here to solve problems and help you be successful at DIBS AI. So that's why we exist. Again, TC, thanks for your willingness to share your expertise today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I didn't put it on the slides, but obviously all the team over at OrthoSelect has my email, and definitely anytime you guys have any questions or any frustrations or anything like that, I'm definitely here to help. And hopefully at future study clubs, I'll get to learn some additional stuff from other docs as well too, because it definitely is a really awesome software with a lot of potential. So anyway,
Awesome.
yeah, thanks so much for
Awesome.
the opportunity too.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks, TC. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Take care.
Bye.